Humility is like a magnet that attracts the presence of Jesus. When you and I operate in humility, he can't help but come, because he himself was the most humble person to ever walk the face of the earth. I heard it said one time by a preacher that humility's definition is this: humility is power under control. Jesus had more power than any human ever. He was God in the flesh, and he chose to operate under control all the way to the point of death. Philippians chapter 2 tells us that he loved his life even not unto death. So he gave everything in this place of humility. So when we as creatives, as worship leaders, as singers, as musicians say, I have the power right now to lash out, to be angry, to be offended, to be bitter, and there's truly justifiable reasons to be that way. And I recognize that even we as a church have not done the best job of operating in this way. But when we choose to not lash out, when we choose to be like Jesus and say, I am going to lay down my life. Matthew chapter 5, when someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to him the other also. When someone forces you to go with them 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. When we choose humility, his presence cannot help but come. I remember a story when I was leading worship many years ago, and there was a situation going on that was really, really intense. And, I was wrong in this way or whatever. And I was just wrestling, and nothing inside of me wanted to go lead worship. And it was a larger service. And so I led worship, and I remember driving home that night, and a friend of mine who knew nothing about the situation that I was going through, they called me on the way home, and they rarely called me, and they said, I was in the service tonight, and it was a very, very, it was a great time in the Holy Spirit's presence during this service. We'll just say that. And they said, I was at the service tonight. It was amazing. The Lord did this, whatever. And they said, I just kind of felt impressed to tell you this from the Holy Spirit, that he says, tonight's service went the way that it did because you were choosing humility. And they didn't know how much that spoke to me, but I knew. And even what Jesus says in the book of Matthew, in Matthew chapter 11, he says, come to me, all you heavy laden, and those who need rest. So if you are struggling with jealousy or hatred or rage towards someone or a situation, you are heavy laden and you're in desperate need of rest. So he says, hey, come to me, all you people who need that, which I feel like is me on the regular, sometimes happens more often than I'd like it to happen. He says, come to me if you need rest. He says, and I will give it to you. And then he says of himself, I believe it's the only attribute Jesus himself spoke of himself is this. He says, come to me because I am humble, because I am gentle and lowly in heart. Meekness and humility is so, so powerful. And it is not popular. I understand it is not comfortable to hold your tongue. It is not comfortable to not make that post. It is not comfortable to not respond the way that you want to respond. I mean, I've responded to so many emails that have never been sent. I end up deleting them. I think it through, I pray it through, and then I send a different response, so different than the one that I'm desiring so deeply to send. And in those moments when even no one else knows about the situation, he is keeping track. And he has this invitation to us, and he says, hey, come to me because I am humble. And guys, when we are like Jesus, again, sometimes there's this grace to not lash out, and sometimes it just feels like, man, everything within me wants to just lash out, and we're not perfect in that regard. But when we choose humility, his presence cannot help but come.